What's going on, everyone? Welcome to your preview show for round number 9 at Unadilla. So today we got a lot to talk about. We have somewhere between 5 and 7 riders returning to the series, and there's also a lot of storylines going on behind the scenes. And I'm also going to tell you why the track this weekend might be a lot crazier than you would expect. Alright, so first up we're going to go through all of our 250 storylines, and the first 250 storyline I have for you guys is going to be the Pro Circuit team. So right now there's a lot going on with Monster Energy Pro Circuit. They have Ty Masterpool in on the fill-in rider side of things. They have Levi Kitchen, who's pretty much been killing it. He definitely struggled last weekend, but overall he's had a great season. And now we have Garrett Marchbanks coming alongside them. And then we have Drew Adams, who's currently at Loretta Lynn's, but sounds like he's going to be joining them as well before the year's over. So first up, let's talk about Garrett Marchbanks. He's going to be joining us this weekend in Unadilla on a 250 for Pro Circuit Racing. So this is a pretty significant change for him. We did know he was going to Pro Circuit next season, but now he's going to be racing for them this season. It sounds like when you hear Garrett talk about it, he didn't even know that he was not going to finish out the season for Club MX, and then things happened, and he really wasn't sure how he was going to finish off the season. He was definitely coming up short in the 450 SMX points, and he was also outside the top 20 in the 250 SMX points. However, he is significantly closer on the 250 side of things. Right now, he's only 4 points behind Dylan Schwartz. So Dylan did skip the entire Supercross series, and Garrett only raced Supercross. And listening to Dylan at Washougal, he was pretty comfortable with his points gap. It didn't really seem like anyone was going to be able to close in and pass him, but that was before Garrett was jumping back down to the 250 class. So now Dylan has something to be worried about. The next closest rider ahead of them is Joey Savacci, 27 points up. So it's really going to come down between those two. And honestly, I think it's heavily favored for Garrett Marchbanks. So kind of rough for Dylan, but I think he should probably stay in it. And you never know, if one of these guys ends up not being able to compete in SMX, he's going to be the first alternate directly into the main event. Now, as far as Levi Kitchen, we saw him go 1-1 a couple weeks back, and then last weekend we saw him pretty much struggle at his home race in Washougal. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can bounce back. He's still third in points, and he's still way up there in the SMX points. Still a lot to fight for, so it's going to be interesting to see how he can come back after this break and how he's going to do in Unadilla. And then, of course, we got to talk about Ty Masterpool. So Ty got pretty banged up in that start crash a couple weeks back, but he did manage to come back pretty strong in that moto. However, he definitely struggled at Washougal. You saw him completely fall apart in the second moto. But shout out to Ty for going out there and roughing it. You could tell he's really hungry, he wants it, he did not want to leave any points on the table that he did not have to. And while he still didn't finish quite as good as he might have liked, he still finished pretty good, and he definitely scored some good points. Ty has managed to work himself all the way up to 11th in SMX points, right in front of Max Anstey, so he's definitely off to a good start. It'll be really cool to see how he does in SMX. I think people are pretty concerned about his Supercross skills, and depending on how he can do in SMX will probably determine if he gets a factory Supercross ride next season or not. Then, as I mentioned, we also got to talk about Drew Adams, who's currently at Loretta's. He's doing pretty good, but it sounds like he's going to actually go race some pro motocross this season. He won't be with us this weekend in Unadilla, but it sounds like he is going to show up for the final round at Ironman. Next, we're going to talk about Tom Vialle. So Tom ended up winning the first moto last weekend at Washougal, and then he finished second behind Hayden Deegan in moto number 2. He's definitely close to Hayden Deegan, but definitely not quite on his level yet. It's going to be interesting to see if Hayden keeps that same intensity this weekend in Unadilla. He definitely has a massive points lead. He has over a full race lead over these guys. So technically he could actually skip Unadilla and still have the points lead. Obviously he's not going to do that. But he's at a pretty interesting turning point where he can either fight to keep that whole moto lead, or he can just play it conservative and roll it in for the championship, but he'll probably have to take it down to the final race. So if I'm Tom Vialle, I'm definitely going to want to make it hard on Hayden Deegan and try to get some of those points back and get it back under one race. It's definitely going to be tough to do, and I think overall Tom's probably a little bit disappointed with the season, but looking back at last season, he's definitely made an improvement, and I just have a sneaking suspicion that Tom might win this weekend. Next, let's talk about Joe Shimoda. So Joe got off to his typical mid-pack, kind of not that great start, both motos the last time we were on the track, and he worked his way up to third in both motos, which got him third place overall. So Joe's definitely doing what he typically does. He's coming on strong at the end of the season. Really wish we could see this type of charging at the beginning of the season so he could be a little bit closer in the points battle. But either way, look for Joe to be contending for a podium this weekend. Next, let's talk about Chance Hymas. So Chance has had this nice long break to try to let his ankle heal up. I would imagine he's probably feeling quite a bit better, but due to the severity of his ankle sprain, I'm sure he's still not 100%. So don't expect a whole lot out of Chance. I doubt he was able to ride that much during the break, but he definitely should be closer to where he was before he was injured. However, he's still riding with that torn ACL, so he's pretty banged up. Look for Chance to just try to get through this safe and try to get to SMX as healthy as he can. Next, I want to talk about a couple more guys that we could see returning this weekend, the first of which is Coty Schock. So Coty's been back on the bike for a while now. He's already on his way back from that wrist surgery. We know he'll push through just about anything with him coming back right after breaking his collarbone in Supercross, so I don't think pain's necessarily the issue, but probably a little bit harder to do that with a wrist if it doesn't actually function properly. He's still in the thick of SMX points. He's 15th right now, so he's still probably going to make the top 20, but look for Coty to return this weekend and try to at least get it some points this weekend. Then another guy I think we could potentially see return, but I'm not as clear on, is Nate Thrasher. So Nate also broke his collarbone and did race with it, but it was kind of complicated because he broke it and it was already plated and it was kind of a mess. So after this break, I do expect that he probably has had enough time to heal and come back on the bike. And he technically doesn't have a guaranteed ride with Star Racing next season, or anyone really. So I do expect him to try to come back at some point, and it seems like this would be a good point to return. But other than that, there's nothing really confirmed. But look for Nate Thrasher to potentially return to racing soon, and maybe this weekend. Next, we have 4 450 guys that we know are returning to the series, the first of which being Cooper Webb. So Cooper Webb is going to be returning this weekend in Unadilla. Really excited to see that. He's definitely not known for his motocross skills, but he's still a great rider. Look for him to be somewhere right around the top 10, but realistically, he's probably just here to get the ball rolling and try to, just get some momentum for SMX. Then behind him, we have Ken Roczen. So Kenny is going to be returning for just this race in the 450 class. He will be racing the final round on a 250, but as for the 450 class, he's just going to do this one race in Unadilla. So not that dissimilar to what he did last year, where he only raced one round as well. He hasn't been back on the bike that long, so I don't expect a whole lot out of him, but I really wouldn't be surprised to see him crack into the top 5, and realistically he'll probably be somewhere between that 4th to 8th range. As far as Justin Barcia, not quite the same thing with the first 2 riders. He's just really banged up in his knees. He had to take some time off, and now he's going to be returning to Unadilla for his hometown race, so really cool to see that. But realistically, Barcia just needs to get through here safely, score a few points. He's a little bit ahead of Cooper Webb in SMX, but not a whole lot. So with Webb returning, he just needs to score some top 10 points for the rest of the season, and he should be able to retain his place in the SMX standings. But realistically, I don't think he's overly concerned about that. It's more just for the seeding purposes. I'm sure he's more focused on having a good time at his home race in Unadilla, New York. Or I should say, at Unadilla in New York. Now, as far as Colt Nichols, he will be debuting for the Suzuki guys. So really cool to see that Colt is able to get back out on the track. He's barely inside the top 30, so he's barely qualifying for the LCQ. He should be able to get into the LCQs no problem, but he's pretty far out of range of the top 20. It would take something catastrophic at this point for him to be able to get in there. So realistically, I think he just needs to get out there, gel with the bike a little bit, get some track time, get some gate drops, and stay safe, and just build some momentum for SMX. He's probably going to have to go through the LCQs, but no big deal. Nicoletti did it last season and it worked just fine. And speaking of Phil Nicoletti, he is at the very top of what we have, a 6-rider battle that's within 7 points of the cutoff in SMX points. So at the top, as I was saying, we have Phil Nicoletti with 125 points. Then right behind him, we have Harry Kulas with 120, who's tied with Kyle Chisholm, who also has 120. And then Dean Wilson is in 19th with 119 points. And on the bubble, we have Grant Harlan in 20th place with only 118 points, who's tied with Marshall Welton, who also has 118 points. And then right behind them, we have Justin Hill, who's 106 points back. So it's going to be interesting to see if Justin does return to racing at all this season. He did talk about coming back to motocross earlier on in the season when he took his break, but so far I haven't heard anything. So as of right now, Marshall Welton is the odd man out, but he's basically tied for the bubble spot. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on those guys. They are absolutely locked in a heated battle. I'm curious to see if Dean Wilson races the rest of the rounds like he has been since Redbud, or if he ends up having to miss one and that ends up costing him. But definitely keep your eye on that little battle. There's a lot of money on the line just being able to be guaranteed to be in the top 20 in SMX. Now, as far as the track conditions, I am a little bit interested to see what's going on with this weather. As of the time of recording this right now, it is currently raining there, and it's supposed to pretty much rain all week long. Now, it does look like we could potentially have a clear racing window without rain, but it is even supposed to be raining Saturday morning. So this is going to be a very saturated track, at least as of right now. And I am a little bit interested to see, especially with some of the low spots on the track where there could be some really severe puddling, like the dip before the finish line and things like that. I haven't physically been there to see that myself. I'm sure they have some drainage built in, but there's no way that you can get that much rain and not have some really bad puddles or at least some overly saturated dirt. So I kind of hope that it's not actually raining during the race, but even if it's not, it's a good chance that this could be a mud race. So keep your eye on that, keep your eye on the weather. I'll get you guys another update before we get to the actual race day. I always do a race day update Saturday morning before the races, so make sure you tune in for that. But if you guys are making any kind of bets or playing fantasy, just make sure you're keeping the weather in mind and the fact that it could be a mud race. But that's going to go ahead and do it. I think that's a good place to stop for our preview show. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.